how did you get interested in rodeo?
I was raised in Red Lodge, Montana, and Red Lodge was the home of the Greenos. And if you're up on rodeo history, they were in the 30s and 40s, and and then the Lindermans in the 40s and 50s. And of course, there's a life-size, bigger than life-size statue of Bill Linderman out here in the hall. Bill Linderman, I've known since I was a little kid. I've always known him. Yeah,
really influenced.
Yeah, and he was the main one that really. He was sort of like my hero.
I see.
But there wasn't anything when I was a little kid growing up. We didn't have TVs, and there wasn't much to do in Red Lodge. And I was around horses all my life. I can't remember when I didn't ride horses, but they had what they called the 4th of July. They had the Home of Champions rodeo in Red Lodge every year, and since I can remember, we would go there, and I'd be watching the Lindermans ride, and the Greenos had kind of retired before I can remember seeing them ride. But all my grown-up years, Bill, Bud, Doug, John Linderman were the story of the rodeo people, and they put Red Lodge on the map. And that's all I ever wanted to do, ever since I can remember, is ride saddle broncs. Well, I actually started riding bareback horses in I think in 1958 when I did my senior year of high school in Cody, Wyoming. We moved to Cody that year, and so that year of 1958 I started riding bareback horses at the Cody Night Rodeo, and of course, which was just a big blur. I got on. I never got a qualified ride in 2 years there.
Oh, really?
But
were you just riding bareback at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
In 58 and 59, I just rode barebacks. In 1960, I started riding saddle broncs.
And what made you change?
Well, I always wanted to ride saddle broncs. I just never had a saddle, never had any. I finally got me a saddle, and I started entering the saddle bronc riding. And I rode bareback horses until I got so I could win riding broncs. I rode them to support my habit. It takes a while. It took me years to learn how to ride broncs good.
It says that in your early bronc riding days that it was your dream, despite his own perceived lack of athletic ability and difficulty in learning his craft. Now, what does that mean? I mean, do you think you didn't have an athletic ability?
Well, I don't.
You don't?
That's the fact.
Interesting.
And everybody likes to say, oh, you're just being modest. But even if you heard Winston here in this group interview, I got better each year I rode until I retired, because the reason was that I couldn't get any worse. They didn't say that, but that's the truth. I mean, I'm probably one of the luckiest guys that you'll ever meet, and people don't realize that, but for the skill that I had and the talent that I had, it's unreal how much I got out of it, because I mean, everybody that I competed against was far more talented than I was.
Well, you obviously did something right.
Well, I learned how to ride, but I have a brother that's younger than me that is a natural. From the first time he got on, he has so much talent that it's unreal. But
did he have a rodeo career?
Yeah, he went to the finals once, but it was easy for him, so he didn't.
He didn't pursue it.
He did some, but anyone will tell you he was just unreal how much ability he had. He just didn't really, for whatever reason.
Yeah. In 1961 was the year you won the rookie bronc riding at Cheyenne Frontier Day.
Yeah, that's a pretty good story in itself. I was really naive. When I left Cody, I'd never been out of Cody. Cody was the farthest I'd ever been from Red Lodge, and I'd never been anywhere else. And we just...
How old were you? 61?
I was 20.
20, okay.
Yeah, I was old enough to have been out of it, but I never had. And I left by myself. I drove to Cheyenne. I'd never been on a 4-lane highway in my life, and of course, back then you had Western Union your entry fee, and weeks before and so forth. So I had my entry fees paid, but I didn't have any money. I had an hour by the time I got there, and I paid for a week of room rent, which was like $1 a day in a whole hotel down there that isn't even there anymore. But I didn't have any money then. And I went out there that day, and the only person that I saw at that rodeo that I'd ever seen before was Bill Linderman was judging.
Oh, okay. From Red Lodge.
Yeah, and Bill Linderman, I was scared of him. He was such a big figure to me, and he was gruff. And I always used to have to pack him into the Beartooth Mountains to go fishing in the summer, and he was always barking. And he was a good guy, but he's just gruff. And he's kind of spooked me. And he just, when I seen him there, of course he was judging, and that just made it worse. Had this striped vest on, and he come up and he said something to me in his own gruff, growly way, and scared me worse. And at that time, when you rode, at least they never announced scores or anything, and it was the old markings, like before they changed the scoring, and I didn't even know how they scored. I just got on my horse, battled it out with him, and I'm sure I made a terrible ride, but I stayed on. And I was up on Tuesday, and I come back on Thursday to get on my next one. I didn't have any money, no gas in my car, and I met a bull rider that I knew, and I asked him if he knew where I could get a job, because I didn't know how I was going to get home. And he says, well, why don't you go get your check? And I said, what are you talking about? I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, yeah, you placed on your first horse. So he told me where the office was. I didn't know anything. I mean, I was so naive, and it's just hard to believe how naive I was. But I went over, and anyway, I went over there, and I'd won the first go-round, which was $350 or something, more money than I ever seen in my life. So, and they gave me the check and told me where I could get it cashed. I had that wad of money. Went and got on my second horse, got in my car, drove right home, and got my mom. She'd never had a pair of glasses. She needed glasses. We were poor, very poor people. And Rick, my brother, he's been to the finals 6 or 7 times himself, and it was a real good bronc rider. But he was a little kid, maybe 2, 3 years old at the time. And I took him and my mom to town. I bought her glasses, and I bought him just outfitted him from head to toe. Spent all my money, which didn't bother me then. And there I was again, but I never even thought about it. And a few days later, here come a belt buckle and 2 more $350 checks, because I'd won the second go around and the average.
Oh my goodness.
So then Jim Houston, who was a friend of mine, who was a world champion in his own right, and we got in our car and we took off. And I joined the PRCA that fall. First rodeo I went to, I broke my leg. And but that didn't matter to me. I'd broken 4.